A confirmation about the audio, please, guys. If the audio is clear and available, kindly confirm the same. Thank you. We shall be starting in a couple of moments. So, till now, any difficulties that you are facing, any issues that you are facing till now? Good. I understand we are in the very initial stages, but in this process, see, understand that as we are carrying out this weekend session, so there will be a much greater scope for interaction amongst us as well. So I would encourage you that any kind of preconceived notions that you have, any kind of reservations that you have in your mind, please do not hesitate to ask that question at all. Okay. And when I say preconceived notions or reservations, does not mean whether particular organism is endangered or critically endangered. When it comes to how to prepare for the examination, any kind of issues when it comes to the portion of environment, how to cover the subject in a particular manner, always feel to free to ask that without any kind of hesitation. Okay, just a moment. So before the break, we had been talking about the portion of the tropical rainforest. Now we come over to the portion of savanna. Savanna is what is also referred to as the tropical grasslands. Tropical grassland ecosystem. Now, again, let me ask a basic question for all those who very proudly said that they have covered the portion of geography. Can we have a couple of examples of savannas from various parts of the world? Can you think about a couple of examples of those areas which can be included in the savannas? Africa is one of those regions where you have savanna. I'm asking about the names of the savanna because in geography we also end up studying about the names of various different savanna regions. Can you think about a couple of names here? Pampas, my dear friend Pranay and Priya, Pampas are temperate grasslands. They are not tropical grasslands. Sahel region is a savanna. Good, Kishan. Prairies, again, they are temperate grasslands. So Pampas are temperate grasslands in the region of America. Prairies are the temperate grassland present in the region of Pampas are present in the region of Argentina. Prairies are present in the northern portion in the region of America. So, do we recall the name of Campos and Llanos? Where is it that Campos and Llanos are situated? Do we have any clue? Very good. It is in South America. Campos is in Brazil and Llanos is in Venezuela. So examples are something that should always be there on the tip of the tongue. Okay, so here example you can take off Campos and Llanos. Now, here when we talk about savanna, Tarai is not a grassland, no. Tarai will have a much greater density of vegetation because of predominance of moisture. Tarai will be very significantly dominated by various different types of density that you have. Uh, okay, Kishan, you have a question, and I think most of you would share this query that Kishan has. I have a concern. I went through all the tablet lectures twice, but as exam nature is more inclined towards dynamic, I'm unable to solve 80%. That is a large sum. and I'm preparing for 2025. So, should I mug up all the current affairs? I'm sure many of you would be facing the same concern with the changing pattern of examination. So, what I would suggest to you that look, when you are looking at any of the tablet lectures, and I'm sure all of you have been following the updated list of tablet lectures in general. So, understand the breakup of the prelims examination. Now, with the changing pattern, you have close to around 50 questions or 45 to 50 questions, which are very, very dynamic in nature. But still, there are around 40 to 45 questions which still deal with the basics of the static, right? So it is in those areas where you have to maximize your chances. For example, take the subject such as take the case of polity, for example. Now, in polity, you will have almost 17 to 18 questions which are asked. Almost around 16 of them you can solve easily if you have read the basic book of Lakshmikant, right? So that is where you have to maximize it. If you take the case of, let's say, geography, in geography, 15 questions are asked, 3 are map pointing based. I expect you to maximize those map pointing based questions because they are all dependent on current affairs. They are all driven from current affairs, right? Then the remaining static portion is something that you will be able to solve if you have done the static portions correctly. So the first target that all of you should have is to attack the basic portion in such a way that no part, or if a question is asked from the basic, at max out of 45 you are able to commit only around 5 to 6 mistakes. That's it. Even if you attain that level of proficiency, even if you ensure that 40 of those questions are correct out of 45 of those static questions, you take your marking level close to around 80. That means you still have around 55 questions to play around with, where you have to score around 20-30 marks at maximum. So that is why revise those basics as much as possible, including your own note making. Take up the previous year questions, take up the test series that we offer. Now, many of the questions in this year's prelims, they have been asked directly from the test series or from the portion of the prelims crash course that we had conducted. Many of those questions. So, there also you will gain some additional sources of information. And the portion of current affairs is something which obviously will be an addendum, where even if you are appearing for the exam, let's say in 2026 or 2025 or 2027, if you want to really succeed in the exam with good marks, as a candidate you are expected to be thorough with newspaper from now itself. Many of the portions are going to be the ones where you will find a bit of discomfort, and that is where you rely upon the portion of the analysis to understand them better. Rather than relying on them as the first source of information, rely on them to get your understanding in a better manner. Those of you who are appearing for 2024, basically understand this is a high time. By now you should already initiate the revision of the portion of all the static subjects, starting with the big four subjects, that is polity, geography, history, economy. So on a monthly basis you should ensure that there is one phase of revision. And the 2024 aspirants, I'm sure you would have picked up the optional preparation as well. So finish up that optional preparation by the month of end December, or first week of, or the first month of next year, January last is by the time when you should be done with the portion of optional. And then will come from February onwards only the phase of appearing for test series, revision, test series, revision. So if you do that, not only will you ensure a good marks in the prelims, but you will be sailing through it easily. You will also ensure a good marks in the mains and interview. Okay. I hope that solves your query, Abhishek and Kishan. Okay. This year also science and tech have questions from the basics. So is the case with environment and ecology. So is the case with geography. So is the case with history. Every year, regardless of the changing pattern, regardless of all the hue and cry that you hear across the spectrum, you will find that basic questions are always going to be asked. There is no way that UPSC is going to set a question paper where no question from the basics have been asked. Okay. And the portion of current affairs, the dynamic series that we cover, that is something which will help you significantly. Even UPSC does not expect you to score 150 plus in the present day and age. That is why this year's cutoff, we are expecting it somewhere between 80 to 85. Okay. Can I start practicing set right now? As in the test paper, if you are talking about, yes, absolutely, yes. As early as possible, you should initiate the practice of test series. And that is going to be one of the biggest chunk in terms of knowledge addition that you carry out in the subjects such as environment ecology, science and technology, art and culture, right? In these subjects, medieval, modern, there are many bits and pieces of information that you don't find in regular books, but then those come into prominence at the time when they are put into portion of current affairs. So that is where you should always keep your eyes and ears open while practicing the test series. Ideally, always go into the exam hall after practicing close to around 2000, 3000 multiple choice questions. After that, go into the exam hall after you have revised all of them. That will give you a level of confidence that nobody can basically snatch away. Even this year, we have had, despite all the difficulties of the question paper, few of the candidates that we were expecting that they will go through, they did go through, and they did score significantly well. We had a couple of candidates who were, at least in the subject of geography, I was very sure that they are going to clear the prelims. Now they have secured marks between 105 to 110, and they are preparing already for the mains examination. Okay. But to what extent current affairs? Should I read magazine or newspaper and important articles? You should be reading ideally the newspaper on a daily basis. Revise it very frequently with the monthly magazine. Each of the monthly magazine for the past year or so should be revised thoroughly at least 5 times before you enter the exam hall. Keep that as a notion of thought. Okay. So I left job for prep due to the failure. Uh, will this much time left, 10 months, will be enough to prepare? So, Inderpreet, I don't know if you are aware of this example that I already gave it once. And that is where we had one of those candidates who basically quit her job in the month of November, and she started preparing, and she cleared the prelims in the first couple of months. She studied the some portion of optional as well. She cleared the prelims. She was able to clear the mains and secure a rank of 169. And that is when she started the preparation in November, right? So please don't, by this example, don't set an example that I'm going to start preparation in the month of November. Start preparation from now itself. UPSC also ends up preferring those candidates who have not wasted a lot of their time. So it will always prefer candidates who don't have a lot of gap in between. So don't worry about it. That is why you will find a lot of first timers clearing the examination in itself. So keep that as a point of view and start preparing. Understand what you have to study. Get that very, very clear. What you have to study, how many times you have to revise, and for those many times of revision, how much time will you take? So, by when do you need to finish the portion? That is something. And it is from this particular time onwards, that is end July onwards, all of us who have, let's say, for some reason or the other, have not succeeded in 2023 prelims. As of now, your mind might be telling you there is a lot of time before the next year prelims, but you will not realize how the time passes through, and when you are again confronted with April 2024, and again you will not have any time. So utilize each and every day as it passes. Okay. Asif, it's okay if you have not cleared the examination earlier. It is absolutely okay. But the aspect of it is, have you extracted something out of the failure? Have you extracted some methodology or some phenomena where you were not doing particularly well? Which are the regions where you have not performed well? Single it out and stress upon those. And when I say a region where you have not done well, they can be the concept based questions, they can be the content where it was weaker, they can be the portion of current affairs, they can be that I knew the questions but I committed negative marks. So basically divide the questions that you have committed wrong into these categories. Analyze where is it that there's a bigger loophole. Work upon that. Take up as many practice tests as you can. Only then will you improve. And Gulam, prelims or mains test series C. Ideally, as of now, I'm for those candidates who have had a basic level of preparation. For all those candidates, I'm actually suggesting them that as of now, practice answer writing. This is the time to practice answer writing if you are appearing for 2024 examination. And for all of them, I am actually recommending them to take the mains test series, because once you get into the churn of prelims, you will never get time to write answers at all. And succeeding in prelims should not be your goal. Your goal should be to succeed in the mains examination. Prelims is just one of the hurdles. So take up the mains test series, try to write answers, and ensure at this stage of time that every day you are writing at least 4 to 5 answers. If you have given a prior attempt, or if you have completed the preparation earlier also, at least 4 to 5 answers on a daily basis you should be writing. And then eventually from November first week onwards, take up the prelims test series. Okay. What should be the revision for a strategy for all subjects revision for monthly basis? It depends on person to person, but ideally you should be able to revise the basic 4 subjects at least once every month if you have completed them. So that will come with how you distribute time, what is the time available to you. I think 2024 prelims exam would be delayed due to general election. No, it is something where it will be available, it will be held, conducted in the month of June itself. And when you take a look at the previous timeline of the elections, then the election results are declared by mid of May. So don't keep all your hopes harped up on the fact that general election means delay of exam means I have more time. No, take a target that it will be conducted in the first or in the first part of June itself. Copy evaluation is available after subscription. You can basically send it to us. You can send it to me as well, Kishan. Don't worry, you can send it to us at IS Live. We take care of that. Don't worry about it. We have still managed. I still am in touch with many of the candidates whose sessions actually expired more than a year and a half before. So any issues that they face, they still get in touch with me. And if a candidate is serious, understand the psyche of any particular mentor or any particular faculty for that matter. If a candidate is found to be serious, everybody goes out of their way to help them as well. So it is all that seriousness should be there from the side of the candidate. And we are able to find out whether the candidate is serious or not based upon the type of questions, based upon the type of approach that they have. So don't worry about it. Okay. Now, I'm prepared for 23 but can't pass this exam. Very stressed. Don't worry about it, Gulam. Just take a look at each of the small targets. Set your small targets, start achieving them, start clearing those targets, and you will be in a good position. See, why is it that the confidence level goes down? Confidence level generally goes down because we feel that we are not working hard enough. That is when you lose your hope and you start exploring other avenues. But ensure that on a daily basis you are working hard. Ensure that, for example, tomorrow is Monday I will extract as much as possible. And then you will find that you keep on repeating it for 21 days. 21 days, why I say, is because that much time it is taken to gain a kind of a habit. So repeat it for 21 days. You'll find that naturally you are in a flow where you won't be concerned about those demotivated days. And Sudhanshu, how many months of current affairs will be sufficient? 12 to 18 months, depending upon the time available that you have. Okay. My mail ID is at Byju's. So you can connect with me on this. But here also, I will attach a caveat. It is not as if you will mail me a message right now and you start expecting an answer tomorrow morning. It doesn't happen like that. Every day, because of the number of candidates that we are in consistent touch with, we end up receiving close to around 100 150 mails. So every day we do clear a chunk of 50 mails. So give us a time period of 48 to 72 hours to clear your mail. In case your mail doesn't get responded to within 48 to 72 hours, please be gentle enough to send a reminder and I will take a look into it. Okay? So don't get impatient. Overall, if you want to ensure a kind of a healthy conversation, we will always have that. Okay? Now, after this, we come back to the topic. I hope that particular issue is addressed. So we come back to the topic and we talk about the savanna, the tropical grasslands. Now, when we talk about tropical grasslands, these are the ones where you can think about from the image itself, from the picture itself, that there is a considerably large dry season, followed by a short wet season, again followed by a very long dry season. That is something that you will find to be prominent. Now, because of that dry season and lack of rainfall in general, you will find that the density of the trees is not very high. You will have one or the odd trees here and there, and that will be interspersed with lot of grasses, right? Lot of various different grasses. Now, these grasses, they will get drier, but the presence of these grasses in sheer numbers, what does that tell us about the presence of herbivores? Do you think there will be a significant herbivore population here or not? What do you think? Will it have a large herbivore population or will it not be there? Huge. Very good. Correct. So here you will have large herbivore population. And when I say large herbivores, you will find the larger organisms, giraffes, in the case of Africa, elephants, all the larger ones, bisons, you will find them to be present amongst these grasslands. Okay, or you will find them to be present along these grasslands. Now, when you have so many large elephants, for example, herds of elephants, for example, in the region of Africa, you have the Masai Mara region in the region of Kenya, you have the Serengeti in the region of Tanzania. Now, that is dominated by the savanna grasslands. And when you have these savanna grasslands, so automatically, when they move in large groups, large number of elephants, when they move in large groups, they will pound the ground with so much of pressure that even the smallest of the trees which try to grow, even they will be basically plowed down. So that is why elephants are also referred to as natural gardeners of this ecosystem. Elephants, they are referred to as natural gardeners of the ecosystem. Of ecosystem. Why? Because in these areas you will find that immediately, and how elephants significantly help in the biodiversity as well. You'll find that immediately after the rainfall comes, all these grasses will suddenly start growing. There will be greenery all around, all these grasses, barren land. There will be fresh grasses which will start growing, and they will grow in a wild manner. Now, what the elephants do by moving through and by uprooting the large number of grasses, not all the grasses that they uproot will they consume. Some of them they consume, some of them they simply throw on the side. They create pathways, and those pathways are utilized by other organisms. And that is how the elephants are able to maintain the grassland ecosystem in this particular area. They modify the ecosystem in this particular area. But when we talk about the dry season is very prolonged. It is the dry season where you have a large scale migration which is carried out. All the organisms, they basically migrate over large distances for availability of some amount of green pasture, some amount of green vegetation, some amount of water as well. Now, when the grasses are very dry, when the conditions are very dry, in those conditions, if there is a let's say thunder and lightning, what happens? All those dried grasses, they act as fuel. And that is where you experience wildfires. So wildfires are very common phenomena, are a common phenomena. And these wildfires also ensure that not many trees will grow in that region because they will burn down anything which has started growing up. So you have multitude of factors which are at play to ensuring that this region is not dominated by trees. Now, what about carnivores? Will you have the carnivore population in this area or not? What do you think? Perfect. You will have a very high carnivore population. So, be it the lions, be it the tigers, be it the not tigers so much, but lions, cheetahs, leopards, in certain cases, tigers, all of these carnivores will be hyenas. They will be very, very active. In fact, as I was telling you about the docu-series and the documentary, the new series which has been created about the migration patterns of the animals. Now that talks about how species or various different groups of lions, they consistently keep on waiting for these cross migrations to happen. When you have onset of rainfall and the animals, they come back to these grasslands, the lions, they wait for that migration because they know that migration is going to happen. And that is where they are so very dependent on the availability of food. So that is the characteristic nature of grassland, savanna grassland. UPSC has asked a prelims question from this twice, minimum of twice in the prelims, just based upon these particular topics that we have discussed. So, savannas are grasslands with scattered trees found in dry tropics, such as East Africa's modest altitudes. Example in Africa, you have Masai Mara Reserve in the region of Kenya. You have the Serengeti in the region of Tanzania. Locate these regions. Okay, the minimum that you can do is look at the map of Africa, look at where these areas are. Now the annual rainfall ranges from 90 to 150 centimeter with a dry spell of 3 to 4 months. Many of the times the dry spell prolongs. So when you have the prolonged dry spell, that will always end up initiating wildfires and forest fires. The fauna includes great diversity of grazers and browsers. For example, you have antelope, buffaloes, zebras, elephants, rhinos, and carnivores will also include lions, cheetahs, hyena, mongoose, and many different types of rodents as well. Yes, Namibia will also have a savanna vegetation. So that is basically what you have as the case of the savanna biome. Okay. So what regulates the savanna biome in terms of what does not allow the growth of abundant amount of trees here? First will be limited rainfall. Second will be the very frequent predominance of forest fires and wildfires. Third will be the presence of large herbivores such as elephants, which serve as natural gardeners. So, all these 3 points you have to keep in mind, due to which the savanna does not observe frequent growth of trees. Now, then comes the desert biome. Now, desert can be warm as well as it can be cold. Okay, desert can be either ways. But when we talk about a desert, one of the common factor is an absolute deficiency of moisture. So this is where moisture deficiency is one of the key parameters. moisture deficiency is going to be one of the key parameters. That means amount of water lost by evaporation will always be significantly higher as compared to the amount of water received by precipitation in general. Okay. Now, the organisms in this region, they also would have adapted and have adapted quite significantly to this region. So, because there is a moisture deficiency, all the adaptations are to retain moisture. Adaptations ensure retention of moisture. Okay. So, how do they do that? For example, you'll find that in the case of the animals, they don't pass out a liquid urine. When generally animals they will urinate, they will relieve themselves, it is in the form of liquid material. But in the case of deserts, desert animals, you will not find that as a phenomena. They will extract or absorb the liquid present even in urine. So that is why they will urinate in the form of solid substances. Also, here, if you think about it, in the case of the desert, when is it that the conditions will be very oppressive? In the daytime or in the nighttime? In majority of the warm deserts that we talk about, the conditions will be oppressive during daytime or nighttime? Daytime. Perfect. So that is why majority of the animals that you come across, they will be nocturnal in nature. That is, they will be active during the night and they will be dormant during the day. Okay. So you have nocturnal species. Now, here, when we talk about these deserts and the desertified conditions, many of the organisms and animals, they will be extracting moisture from the humidity present, because at the night time the temperature will drop quite sufficiently, so you will have some humidity, some moisture present in the air. So many of the species of rodents and small frogs, etc., that you will find, they will be able to absorb that moisture through their skin as well. So all the adaptations are for absorption of and retention of moisture. Other than that, when we talk about the plant species, here in the deserts you have specific kinds of plant species which we refer to as xerophytes. Xerophytes. These are the plant species to be found in the deserts. Plant species found in deserts. Now, ideally, the leaves of the plants, they are generally the ones where you will find that water is lost on a daily basis into the atmosphere by the process of transpiration, right? All the leaves have the pores through which water is lost into the atmosphere by the process of transpiration. So here the xerophytes, in order to retain water, they don't have leaves, do not have leaves. To conserve water which would otherwise have been lost by the process or the method of transpiration. Then, other than that, here the stem that develops the green pigmentation to basically carry out photosynthesis and produce food. Stem are or stems have green pigmentation, pigments to carry out photosynthesis. Now it is in these stems that you will find the storage of food as well. That is why these stems are generally pulpy and fleshy. Okay, so food is stored in the stems, is stored in fleshy. Yes, cactus can be an example in fleshy stem. Okay, that is where food is significantly stored. Now it is in order to protect that stem which carries all that stored food, that is why you will find the cacti to develop certain thorns. Okay, that is where the cacti will have thorns to protect that stem and stored food. Now in the deserts it is not as if you will not find any trees as well, at all. There will be certain trees here and there. In very small areas where, let's say, you have moisture abundance, you will find certain trees. But there on the leaves, you will find a covering of wax. Waxy coating will be there. Why? To retain water again. So, leaves, in case of certain trees have waxy coating to retain water. Now, many of the plants here, they will, yes. Can we find some of the gymnosperms? Very few, but yes, Sridevi, we can find that. Yes, just like Mehdi plants. Now, here, when we talk about the desert locations, in many of the regions of the deserts, you will receive very small amount of rainfall for a very limited time duration, after which there will be no rainfall significantly. So that is where you will generally find that you have certain kinds of plant species which are referred to as ephemeral species. What are ephemeral? So when there is presence of moisture, when there is presence of rainfall, immediately the plants will start to bloom, blossom, because that is when they will flower. And as soon as again the dry conditions prevail, within 12 to 15 days or 1 month, that plant will dry up again. The roots will remain active. And again, when the rainfall comes, again you have that ephemeral flowering of the plants. So here you have ephemeral plants, ephemeral plants, which flower immediately upon receiving rains, and go dry thereafter. Okay. Now, if you take a look at the adaptations that are carried out, so basically, in the case of the animals, generally here camel is taken as an example. So, in the case of the camels, all the adaptations are done, which are very, very unique to the region of the desertified landscape. So, here you will find that the camels, they will have thick eyebrows in order to withstand the heavy gust of wind carrying a lot of sand and sandstorms in general. They will have the kind of a broad and webbed feet in order to navigate through the desert location. So they will have very wide feet and they will have a thick fur. Many of the desert organisms, they will have a very thick fur. Now, can you think of the reason why they have a thick fur? If the conditions basically is something which is very hot in the desert, why is it that the organisms develop a thick fur? Let me know. Any of you? Go dry means the plant will basically the entire plant will go dry, the roots will remain active. No, not for moisture retention. That is because in the desert areas, the no, not to store water. Very good. Abhishek and Asif. So, in the desert areas, during the night time, the temperature goes down very drastically, very significantly. The temperature will go down. So, in order to protect themselves from extremity of cold conditions, that is why the species have got thick fur. So, in deserts, night temperature goes down very quickly. In order to protect from cold conditions, protect themselves from cold conditions, species have fur. Okay, right? So that is why many of the species, in the case of the deserts, you'll find that they have the presence of fur as well. Then we come to the temperate forests. Now, when we talk about temperate forests, temperate here refers to what? That the temperature conditions are moderate. It is not going to be very hot. Okay. So, when it is not going to be very hot, the rate of evaporation will be lesser. If the rate of evaporation is lesser, then moisture retention generally should be sufficient, isn't it? So, in temperate areas also, you will find, particularly in the coastal stretches where you have the presence of onshore winds, for example, the Pacific coastline in North America, you will find the presence of evergreen trees. Now, here the moisture sufficiency is maintained. Why? Because the rate of evaporation is very low. Okay, not very low, but comparatively low. So, rate of evaporation is comparatively low. So, moisture sufficiency is maintained. Okay, now this is generally here also you'll find temperate forests in this region also. Okay, generally you will find across the coastal landscape in the temperate regions. That is where you will have the conditions to be slightly lower and the presence of temperate forest as well. So these are deciduous under moderate conditions with winter freezing. Wherever you have winter freezing, there obviously there will be shedding of the leaves during the winter season because they won't be able to handle so much amount of winter snow. It is spread across the region of North America and Europe and some part of Asia as well. So, evaporation and transpiration are outweighed by precipitation. So, precipitation in comparison is more as compared to evaporation and transpiration. And why is that? Why is that? That is because of lower temperature. So, that means forest areas of Shivalik range will not come under temperate forest. No, if you go to a greater height in the middle Himalayas, then you will get a temperate forest. Generally, in the case of the Himalayas, when you go beyond a height of 1000 to 2000 meters or 1500 meters, that is when you have temperate forest. Asif, is spur, or is it fur that you are asking? Is fur protects them from intense cool or also from heat? No, not from heat. Fur retains heat. So fur will never protect you from excess amount of heat. Fur will always protect you from excessive cold conditions. Okay. Now, Then comes the temperate grasslands, the examples of which all of you had been taking. So here the examples are, examples if you will consider, you will have prairies in the region of North America, steppes in the region of Asia, Central Asia. Then you will have pampas in the region of South America. Then other examples, velds, very good, in the region of South Africa. Then very good, pustas in the region of Hungary. Then other than that, beautiful downs in the region of Australia. In the region of New Zealand also you have one. What is that referred to as? New Zealand also will have Canterbury, beautiful. Canterbury in the region of New Zealand. So these are your examples of various different temperate grasslands. Temperate grassland means that the temperature is lower as compared to tropical grasslands. Now here, in general, there will be greater moisture sufficiency. Why? Because again, the rate of loss of water through evaporation or transpiration will be very low. So greater amount of moisture retention, right? Moisture retention because of lower temperature. Now, what do you think will be the amount of organic content in the soil? Will the organic content be high, or do you think the organic content here will be low? What do you think? Very good. Himanshu, Kishan, Ayushi, correct. Abhishek, Gulam, incorrect. Sridevi, correct. So here, organic component will be very high. Content is very high. Why? Rate of, because of low temperature, rate of decomposition is slow. Due to low temperature, rate of decomposition is slow. Now, will you be finding large herbivores in these areas? What do you think? Will you be able to come across large herbivores? Yes, you will be. So, you will find herbivores in large population as well. And then that also brings carnivore population in that region as well. So this grassland biome is found in various parts of the world. We have talked about it. Now, because rainfall is infrequent, organic waste does not degrade quickly, and the soil is very rich in organic material. Now, the fauna include large herbivores like bison, antelope, cattle, bilge animals as well, rodents, prairie dog, wolves, and therefore a significant amount of carnivore population will also be found in this particular area. Okay. Now, here, do you think forest fire will be a common factor? Perfect. Here, forest fire is not a commonality, because the dry conditions are not going to prevail significantly, because always there is a moisture sufficiency. If you are able to decipher this much, you need not worry about the kind of questions that UPSC is going to ask. If this much concept clarity is there, be assured at your level. Don't worry about it. Okay. Now, after this, we come to the region which is referred to as the taiga or the coniferous forest, or what is also referred to as the boreal forest biome. This is where you have the coniferous trees. Now, in this case, you will find that the trees, they have a conical shape, and even the leaves, they have needle shape, right? So conical shape trees and needle shaped leaves. Why? Why is it so? Good. In order to handle excessive amount of snow, because if the leaves are broader and if you have significant amount of snow falling on that, then the leaves won't be able to withstand that weight and they will immediately break open. And also, if let's suppose the trees have a shape somewhat like this, then all the snow will accumulate, all of that will eventually break down. So that is why the trees also have a conical shape and the leaves also have needle shape. Now, here, what do you think about the organic material or the organic content level in the soil? Will it be high or will it be low? What do you think? Good. The organic level will in general be high, because here also rate of decomposition will be very slow. So Abhishek, Kishan, Nikita, Ayushi, correct. So here also you'll find the organic component to be higher. Generally, conifers are found to be present in higher latitudes and higher altitudes. Okay. So evaporation is minimal because of low temperature. Soil remains moist all throughout the year. So these locations are known as taiga forest because the vegetation is made up of needle leaves. So soil remains moist all of the year, but due to low temperature, rate of evaporation, or rate of rather decomposition, is very slow. Okay. Now, after this, we have in the polar areas and in the very high altitudes and latitudes, you have the tundra biome, where in the case of the tundra biome, you will find the growth of mosses and lichens primarily. These are the ones which will predominate. Is there always snowfall? Where, Sridevi, in the case of the boreal region or in the case of the tundra? In either cases, you will experience snowfall. In boreal, not on a daily basis, but in the boreal region, you will have seasonal snowfall. But in the case of tundra, that will be perpetual. That will be something which is permanent. So when we talk about the tundra biome is experienced in very high latitudes and very high altitude, where the temperature is so very low throughout the year that even small shrubs or grasses cannot grow. However, having said that, there is a change which is being witnessed in the region of Antarctica. Now, because of climate change, the coastal regions of Antarctica, they have begun to remain ice free almost through the year. Few of the coastal areas. And in those regions, now you will find the growth of flowering plants. So there is a change which is happening in the tundra biome. Earlier, tundra biome would be restricted only in the coastline of Greenland, northern part of Eurasia, and northern part of Canada. But now that is spreading over the region of the coastal Antarctica as well. Okay, because coastal Antarctica, and that is significantly damaging the natural habitats of many of the seals that you find, many of the species of fishes that you find, even in the case of the penguins also. So those are the areas which are now they have started to remain ice free through the year. Okay. Now, that is about tundra biome. It is a treeless expanse underlain by permafrost to the north of boreal forest. Now, here, alpine tundra is a similar habitat that might be found at high latitudes, right? High elevations, rather. So, these are basically tundra at tundra habitat in mountain tops. Mosses and lichens are found to be growing during the summer. What are lichens? What do we understand by lichens? Lichens, they are basically a symbiotic relationship. Symbiotic relationship between which organism? Let me see if we are aware. Yes, they are a pollution indicator. Yes, algae is one of the species. Very good. Algae and fungi. So these are your symbiotic species where you have a symbiotic relationship between algae and fungi. See, the reason why I am asking you so many questions is it is by this process of repeating these questions again and again where I hope that you will commit some mistakes as well. Many of the times you will get it correct as well, as you most of you are getting it correct. So when you repeat this format, it will stay for a longer period of time in your mind. So in the entire process of environment, we are going to follow this approach. Okay. So here typical organisms that you will find are reindeer, Arctic fox, polar bear, etc. Here you will not find reptiles. Why? Because the ground condition is very cold. And here you will also not find small rodents. Why? Because when we talk about the small rodents, the smaller ones, for them, the surface area in comparison to their size is very large. And when the surface area is large, they lose heat quickly. So that is why they are going to freeze to death. That is why here you won't find small rodents. Okay. Now, after this, we come to the portion of the aquatic biome. Aquatic biome basically refers to those portions underwater. Now, for a long period of time, our thought process was that life would be limited to only those areas where light is able to penetrate. In those areas where life is not able to penetrate, there won't be life. But obviously, after Second World War, during the phase of various explorations, we came to know better. We did know that yes, life does exist even in the darkest regions of the ocean. But then, when we talk about the factors limiting the productivity in aquatic habitats or aquatic ecosystem, here you have three major factors. One is the availability of sunlight, right? Availability. Now, if you have read about the portion of the oceans, if you have read about the distribution of the oceanic relief, you would have studied that there are various different areas: continental shelf, continental slope, continental, or rather the deep sea plain, etc. Now, sunlight will be available in which of these areas? When we talk about availability of sunlight, out of all these regions, where is it that sunlight will be very predominant? In the deep sea plains, in the continental slope, or in the continental shelf? What do you think? Photic zone, yes. Where does the photic zone exist? In the shelf area. Okay. So shelf region, continental shelf is the region where you have maximum amount of sunlight available. Continental shelf. Now, these continental shelf, just to tell you how significant factor light is, this continental shelf represents only 7 to 9% of all oceanic area, and houses more than 90% of the oceanic biodiversity. Okay, it houses more than 90% of the oceanic biodiversity that is included in the region of the continental shelf in itself. So that is why sunlight is very relevant. However, in the region of the deeper oceans, you will also come across chemoautotrophs. It is not only photoautotrophs which will dominate, you will also find many of the chemoautotrophs to be living in the bottom of the ocean as well. Then dissolved oxygen. Now, the oceanic species, the marine species, they will also carry out respiration, but the respiration that they carry out is through the methodology of gills, other than the whales generally and the dolphins as well, which come up to breathe in and breathe out. Other than that, majority of the species, they will breathe underwater and carry out respiration underwater. So they need the presence of dissolved oxygen. Due to pollution, due to certain other factors, sometimes the oceans and the water bodies, they get devoid of oxygen. And such water which is completely devoid of oxygen, we will study it in the portion of marine pollution. So such waters completely devoid of oxygen, that is referred to as hypoxic water. Okay, so water devoid of oxygen, that is referred to as hypoxic water. I will show you the areas also where these hypoxic waters prevail. So this is basically water devoid of dissolved oxygen. Okay. Now, in this case, when the water doesn't have enough dissolved oxygen, the species, they find it particularly difficult to exist, to breathe in. And that is where either the majority of the species in that region, they end up, or they basically perish, they die, or they migrate somewhere else. So that establishes dead zones, dead zones underwater. Okay, that leads to the establishment of dead zones. Okay, now then another factor which influences productivity is the temperature condition. And we have already seen that majority or large majority of the marine organisms, they have a very narrow tolerance window for temperature change. Why? Because historically they have lived in a condition, they have lived in an area where the temperature has been consistent throughout. So that is why their body is not adapted to to handle changing temperature conditions. So marine species have very limited temperature tolerance. Marine species have very less temperature tolerance. Okay. Now, then when we talk about freshwater ecosystem. Now, freshwater ecosystem, what kind of ecosystem is referred to as freshwater? Where the salt content, the salinity level is less. So that is considered to be freshwater. Now, this ecosystem can be of two types. You can have water which is moving, and you can have water which is standing or stagnant water. So the flowing freshwater systems, they are referred to as lotic systems. These trivias, they are relevant for your prelims. So that is where you have the moving water. Now, that movement of water is very essential. For example, when you talk about streams, when you talk about rivers, that flow of water that it has, that it generates, is very, very relevant and important for not only maintaining the oxygen level, but also ensuring availability of nutrients. Because when the water ends up flowing, it is through the water air exchange. and that interface where a lot of oxygen is dissolved in the water. So the ecological flow is important to retain oxygen and nutrients. So that is why always ecologists will give you an argument that building dams or providing obstruction to the flow of water, that is something which is going to impact the aquatic systems and the aquatic species in that area in a detrimental way, in a wrong manner. That is why when we will read next weekend about the Namami Gange program, one of the key principles involved in Namami Gange is to ensure the natural ecological flow that the water has to maintain. Okay, it would be mostly available in the youthful and the mature stage. Even in the later stage, even when you talk about the later stage or the old stage of the river, there also some flow will be there. It is not as if water will be stagnant. So some flow will be there, and that flow is important. Okay, having said that, when this river flows, it carries out significant amount of muck, mud and sediments in general. Now, due to that, the visibility factor reduces quite sufficiently. And that is where you have species such as river dolphins, riverine dolphins. Now, they are able to navigate in those muddy waters with the help of echolocation. Location. What is echolocation? So dolphins, they don't have a great eyesight. So basically, they will emit certain sound, and that sound, upon bumping from various different obstacles and objects, that sound will be reflected back. And upon judging those sounds which have been received, they are able to navigate. Okay. So here, yes, similar to bat. So this is basically for movement. Now you have various different types of river dolphin. For example, you have the Gangetic dolphin, which is also referred to as source, or the Gangetic dolphin. Then you have Bhulan. Then you have that is the dolphin. Then you have the Amazon river dolphin. You have the Irrawaddy river dolphin. You have various different types of dolphins. Okay, so you have Indus dolphin. Then you have Amazon dolphin. Then you have the case of Irrawaddy. Irrawaddy dolphin, however, can also exist in saline conditions. That can also end up existing in saline conditions. Exist in saline lakes. Another one of the very unique features or very unique species that you will find is basically a gharial. Gharial is a species of an alligator, whereby now alligators, they are particularly well known for their very unique feature where they are able to move their upper jaw. In general, amongst us humans and majority of the species that you will come across, you will find it is only the lower jaw which we are able to move. The upper jaw is not something that we are able to move. Alligators are one of those who are able to move both their jaws, right? They are able to move the upper jaw as well. Now gharials, they have a prolonged snout. They have a long elongated snout, and that is used to catch the small fish. Okay. Now gharials in India, where is it that it is found? Good. Chambal River. So Gharials at one point of time, Gharials were also to be found very prominently in the region of Brahmaputra and river Mahanadi. Now, Odisha and Assam government, they are in a phase of reintroducing these Gharials. But as of now, prominently in Chambal. In Chambal. Okay. Now, after this, we come across the standing water. That is what is referred to as the lentic system. Okay. So the moving water is known as the lotic system. The standing water, that is what is referred to as the lentic system. Now, here we talk about the lakes and the ponds. By the way, how is it that these lakes they are created? The general lakes that you come across, how are they created? So many of the time they are accumulation of runoff water. Many of the times they are carried out as an erosional event where a glacier has eroded a particular region in the past, created a depression, and now you have water accumulating in that area from the previous glacial melt. Many of the times they are also created as a result of the faults, the fault lines or the cracks which open up and fresh water seeps in. So that is how the lakes can get created. But just like the organisms, the lakes also end up aging. The lakes also grow old. Okay. It is not as if the lakes will always end up remaining in the same stage. As and when the lakes grow older, there will be greater sedimentation and deposition carried out in the lakes. From all the surrounding area, whatever runoff will be generated, everything will be deposited in the lakes itself. And that is when the lakes start getting shallower. So after hundreds and thousands of years, many of the times these lakes, they get converted into a kind of a terrestrial ecosystem. But in general, with the age, the depth of the lake starts to reduce. Why? Because there is deposition. So the stationary freshwater systems are referred to as the lentic system. Now, the depression might be formed as a result of glacial activity, fault zone, meteor impact, or even human excavation, that you have the artificial lakes. With greater sedimentation, the aquatic systems, they transition to wet meadows, which then transition to regions terrestrial biomes as well. Okay, so older the lake, older the lake, greater is the amount of sediments deposited. Okay, now after this, we come to the portion of eutrophication. Eutrophication, in simple terms, is what? It is the overloading of the aquatic system with nutrients. Break. Okay. So, do you need a break right now? We'll be ending the session at 8. Uh, okay. So, fair enough. Since you have requested. So, can we do one thing? Not even 50 minutes are left. Around 55 minutes are left. Uh, if you want a break, I can give you a break of 5 minutes at max. Or can we do without a break? Or 5 minutes are required. Okay, fair enough. So we'll do one thing. We'll take a break and be back by 7:10, and then we will continue. Okay, break till 7:10. 7 minutes break should be sufficient. Let's take a 7 minutes break and let's be back in 7 minutes. A confirmation about the audio, please. If the audio is clear and available, kindly confirm. Okay. So now we come to the portion of eutrophication. Eutrophication is a process by which any aquatic system is overloaded by nutrients. Okay. Whenever you have an overloading by nutrients which is carried out, that is the process which is referred to as eutrophication. So, aquatic systems get overloaded with nutrients. And which nutrients generally they are found to be overloading the aquatic systems? Generally, you will find nitrates and phosphates. And phosphates, they end up overloading them. Now, that leads to a scenario where you will find the development of a thin greenish film develop over majority of the lakes in general. And that is a common feature. Regardless of whichever part of the country you are living in, I'm sure if you would have explored your locality, you would have come across at least a couple of lakes which this with this kind of a view. Okay. And that is a common feature in at least in our country, at least in majority of the areas where pollution is a common factor. Now, in the presence of nitrates and phosphates, that leads to the growth of algae. Growth of algae. Now, if the presence of nutrients is very high, the growth of algae will also be very, very high. And that leads to a situation which we refer to as the harmful algal bloom. Eventually leads to harmful algal bloom. Now, all this green film that you observe settling on the top of the water or top layer in terms of the water bodies, all that green film that you observe is nothing but the blue green algae or green algae which starts to grow. Eventually, this eutrophication is never good for a water body. Generally, this eutrophication is observed in closed water bodies, but then can also sometimes be observed in the open bodies as well, where in a localized region there can be overloading of the nutrients. So in that localized area, even in the case of open seas, sometimes in certain areas you have the observation of the factor of eutrophication. So here, how is it that eutrophication is harmful? Let us understand that. So here, when we talk about the sudden growth, or this is overloading of nutrients, overloading of nutrients. Now, when this happens, you have explosive or exponential growth of algae. Now, these algae, what they will do is cover the top layer of water. So that means availability of sunlight is inhibited, of sunlight is inhibited. right? You don't have enough sunlight which reaches the lower layers of that water body. Now, when enough sunlight is not able to reach the layers or the lower layers of the water body, what will happen to the already existing aquatic plants? They will find it very difficult to survive. So, due to this, other aquatic plants die. Now, these aquatic plants, when they die, what happens to the production of dissolved oxygen into the water? That will also get impacted, isn't it? So the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water goes down. Amount of dissolved oxygen in water goes down. Okay. Now, meanwhile, this algae which has been growing, that will also end up dying as well eventually. All the algae which will grow, they will also die. Now, when the algal species die, when they die, then get deposited at the bottom, at the bottom of the lakes, isn't it? And thereby, here, let's say the dead algal species in large quantities, they have been deposited. Now, there will be decomposition which will be carried out by various different aerobic bacterium and various different aerobic microorganisms. So, microbes in chief, when we talk about the microbes, aerobic bacterium carry out decomposition. Now, when the microbes they carry out decomposition, in that process, as they are able to carry out the process of decomposition, what do they initiate? They will consume oxygen, because for the decomposition process to be carried on, oxygen is one of the components which is required. So they consume oxygen in large quantities. Consume oxygen in large quantities. Now, both these features and both these events overall, they will lead to water turns hypoxic. Okay, the water turns hypoxic. And as the water ends up turning hypoxic, many of the species die. Large number of organisms die. So that is a common feature that you will observe. Now, here, generally witnessed in almost all the urban landscape, when you talk about any lake, when you talk about a pond, a water body, a reservoir, wherever you will have surplus amount of nutrients being overloaded, suddenly, and generally you would come across the news stories that suddenly one day in a particular lake, you have endless number of or hundreds of fishes dead and floating on top. Why is that? Because the water has turned hypoxic. That ends up creating dead zone. Now, which nutrients are we talking about? We are talking about nitrates and phosphates. nitrates and phosphates. Now, where do we get these? So, nitrates basically are discharged as a result of industrial waste, also as a result of farm residue. So, in the nearby farms, agricultural areas, when you actually spray various different fertilizers, nitrate based fertilizers, etc., so that will all that nitrogen and nitrogenous compounds, they will eventually run off and accumulate in the water body. So, this is given, nitrates are given from industrial waste, farm runoff, from fertilizers. What about phosphates? Phosphates are generally generated from untreated sewage, the fecal matter that you have. So, untreated sewage, for example, that has got a lot of phosphate. Bones, remains of organisms, that has got a lot of phosphate. And along with that, obviously, industrial discharge is another one of them. So, here, this is discharge from the untreated sewage or fecal matter, then bones and animal remains, and also you have industrial waste. So that is how eutrophication happens. But it is not necessary that always that green coloration will be developed. That is not a prerequisite. Depending upon the type of algal growth, the color can also vary. It can be brown algae leading to a brown color. Sometimes you have red algae which develops, and that leads to an entire water body gaining a kind of a reddish appearance, a reddish coloration pattern. And this is what is observed in the region around Florida in United States, southeastern part of United States. Now, Florida is well known for its wetlands. It has one of the largest wetlands across the globe. And what do we know them as? They are referred to as everglades. So in those areas, you have a lot of these nutrients which are discharged from the nearby farmlands, from the nearby vegetation areas, etc. And that is where you have a common factor of red tides. So red tides, they are generated in that region of Florida primarily because of the development of algae. Okay, so development of red algae. Development of red algal bloom observed in Florida. Okay, so that is what harmful algal bloom is, and that is how harmful algal bloom can lead to the creation of dead zones, not only in enclosed water bodies. And you have to understand that it is not always going to be restricted to the closed water bodies. It is also sometimes going to be experienced in open systems and seas in a localized region. So, harmful algal blooms are the rapid growth of algae or cyanobacteria that can cause harm to people, animals, or the local ecology. And harmful algae or cyanobacteria can look like foam, scum, paint, or mats on the surface of water and can have different coloration pattern as well. Many of the times you would have observed, even in regions of Delhi, when you come across that woefully bad and harmful image of Yamuna, you will observe that a lot of foam settles up. Now, that is again initiated due to that decomposition process. And by the way, when this decomposition process is carried out, lot of harmful gases such as methane, hydrogen sulfide, etc., they are released in large quantities. And that is where these water bodies, they will always emit a kind of a very pungent and foul stench. Okay, generally when you will come close to these water bodies, lot of pungent and foul smell will also be emitted because of this particular factor. So harmful algal bloom also emits foul stench due to decomposition and release of gases like hydrogen sulfide, and methane. Now, when masses of algae die and decompose, the decaying process can deplete oxygen in the water, causing the water to become so low in oxygen content, it creates a dead zone. Creation of dead zone. Now, after this, we come over to the portion of biological oxygen demand and chemical oxygen demand. What are they and what do we understand by that? So, whenever you have the presence of, let's say, various different organic and inorganic residues which are prevalent in the water, there will be decomposition which will be carried out. Now, whenever that process of decomposition is carried out, it will be carried out on the waste. Now, that process of decomposition will consume some amount of water. So, when we say the biological oxygen demand or chemical oxygen demand of any water body, it talks about the amount of oxygen required for decomposition of waste. Now, here, the biological oxygen demand, or BOD as it is referred to, BOD, it is the amount of oxygen required in order to decompose all the organic waste in water. Then, when we talk about chemical oxygen demand, what is also referred to as COD, that refers to the amount of oxygen which is required to handle all the organic plus inorganic waste which is generated in the water body. So that is basically amount of oxygen required in order to decompose organic and inorganic waste in the water body. So overall, by getting an idea about the BOD or COD, can we also get an idea about the level of pollution? If, let's suppose, in any particular water body, if BOD and COD is very high, what can we say about the pollution level of water in that region? Will the pollution level be high or will the pollution level be low in those areas? Let me know. Very good. It will be very, very high because BOD and COD, they give you an idea about the total amount of pollution. Now, overall, when we talk about a comparison between BOD and COD, in general, for any water body, which will be greater? Chemical oxygen demand of the water body will be greater or biological oxygen demand of a water body will be greater? Perfect. Avni, very good. Kishan, correct. So basically, for any water body, you will always observe that the COD is always going to be greater than BOD. Why? Because BOD handles only the organic waste, whereas COD takes care of both organic as well as inorganic waste. So always in a water body, BOD or rather COD is greater than BOD. Okay. UPSC had asked this question as well in the prelims, that biological oxygen demand represents what? It simply represents the amount of pollution which a water body or a water aquatic ecosystem has witnessed. So these kinds of questions are oftentimes asked in the examination. Higher demand means chances of survival for animals is less. Yes, because there's a greater amount of waste. So greater amount of dissolved oxygen will be consumed for decomposition. So other organisms will face an oxygen deficiency. Then we come over to the portion of wetlands. So when you hear about the term wetlands, here the term in itself is pretty self-explanatory. Wet land. So a kind of a terrestrial ecosystem which has got significant amount of water accumulated, but it is not a complete aquatic ecosystem. So somewhere as a transition between the kind of terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem. Now these wetlands, they are very very important for any particular region. Now for any particular area, wetlands are considered to be the sponges, natural sponges of the ecosystem. So, what are the role played by the wetlands? Role played. So, example of wetlands before that. So, let's say in an area you are carrying out paddy cultivation. Now, that paddy cultivation, if you carry out, paddy means rice. So, in majority of the areas when traditional methodology of cultivation is carried out, how is it that rice is sown? You flood that region with water, and then you plant the seeds and the saplings. So there also you have flooded water, that will form a wetland. In any particular floodplain, if in the low lying area water is retained for a longer period of time, that will also form a wetland. Small lakes, ponds, they will also end up forming a wetland. So these wetlands are very important. So if we talk about the importance, first of all, absorb excess water. Whenever, let's say, you have sudden excessive amount of rainfall, nowadays what do we experience? Whenever you have excessive amount of rainfall, immediately every region is flooded, isn't it? That is what we experience. Be it Delhi, be it Bangalore, be it Mumbai, be it Hyderabad, be it Chennai, any of the urban locales that you consider, excess rainfall means flooding. Why? Because on all these wetlands, what have we done? We have carried out construction, isn't it? You have had a long standing nexus, and all of us are aware of this. There is no point denying it anymore. That there has been a long standing nexus between the builders and the politicians and the bureaucrats as well. All of them have enjoyed hefty amount of money in return, and all of them, they divert those wetlands for construction purposes. Now when you carry out construction on the wetlands, you are in a way preventing that absorption of excess water. So what will happen if there is excess water? It will flood the streets and creates the urban disaster that we experience on an annual basis, right? If you flip back the newspaper headlines, let's say 10 years back, even then the newspaper, or why to restrict yourself to 10 years, flip the newspaper headlines as early as 2006, 2005. You will come across copious amount of flooding that the cities have witnessed. But ask any of your or any of the members in your family of the previous generation or the generation before that. Ask your grandparents, ask your parents, that did they experience so much amount of flooding in the urban areas in their time? The answer will be no. Now, has the amount of rainfall increased substantially since their time? No. But then in those period of time, you had the natural wetland ecosystem, which was one of the cities which is suffering quite predominantly, a couple of cities, is Chennai and Bangalore. Bangalore at one point of time had so many various different lakes and wetlands that it would always present a kind of a green picture. But then ever since, there has been a kind of a construction activity and an encroachment spree, and same is the case with Chennai as well, where the topography of the land in itself has been changed because of construction. So that is when flooding is going to be common. Now, here, other than that, recharges the groundwater. And this is another area where the region such as Bangalore is suffering. Because when you talk about regions such as Delhi, they lie on the floodplains of river Yamuna. So there is a consistent recharge of groundwater, and those are sedimentary areas. So groundwater can be extracted. But when you talk about the plateau region such as Bangalore, which is situated on hard rocky surfaces, that recharge of groundwater can happen only from some limited regions. If that recharge is not happening, and which has not been happening for the past decade and more, you would observe that these areas of, or the urban areas of Bangalore, they are now being completely depleted out of underground water reserve. Then other than that, drinking water supply, then act as filters where heavy contaminants are trapped. So in many of the regions, you will observe that there is a slow, gradual flow in a particular river moving through these grassy areas, and then eventually it has a final discharge into the main river or the main tributary. Now, all the heavy contaminants, they are trapped by these grasses, and they get deposited here. Why? Because when water does flow through these areas of vegetation, the speed of flow reduces, and once the speed of flow reduces, all the deposition is carried out, and heavy contaminants are the first ones to get deposited. So the water uh, which is to be found after that process, that is going to be purer. So that is why these wetlands act as filters. Then provide shelter and support to wide variety of biodiversity. Then also, in many of the regions, these wetlands, the water contained in them, they end up trapping greenhouse gases like methane, because whenever you have plant activities or any decomposition activities which are carried out, methane is one of those primary gases which are produced. Now these gases, they are trapped in that water. That is why when wetlands are lost, or when the wetlands they eventually dry out, all that methane is then supplied into the atmosphere, and you have greenhouse or global warming. So this is where trap gases like methane. Hence, when the wetlands dry, dry out large quantities of greenhouse gases are released in the process. Okay. So, if a question comes about the relevance or the importance of wetlands, not only in the portion of GS paper 3, but UPSC also keeps on repeating the same question about urban floods in GS paper 1. So, if a question is asked about either of these, you need to have the ability to explain or elaborate them. Each of the points that we have mentioned here, for each one of them, minimum 2 to 3 sentences you can write. And also, you should be able to create a kind of a schematic diagram. And what is that schematic diagram going to look like? So, let's suppose a land area where you show a kind of a depression like this, a slight depression to hold that water, indicate the presence of plants, right? And indicate how they will absorb excess amount of water, and they will help to recharge the underground level. So even these simplistic diagrams, if you represent in the answer copy, they end up creating a lot of difference. Okay. Now, after this, here is basically the definition of it. So, wetlands mean those areas that are inundated or saturated by surface or groundwater at a frequency and a duration sufficient to support, under normal circumstances, they do support a prevalence of vegetation typically adapted for life in saturated soil conditions. Now, wetlands include swamps, marshes, bogs, and other similar areas where you have saturated water condition, where you have the presence of standing water in general. Now, for a long period of time, it has been understood that these wetlands require conservation and they need to be preserved. It was, in fact, in the 60s when this discussion had been initiated, with the first meeting held in Vienna. Now, initially, the conference which was held in the early 60s, that was referred to as the Mar Conference. Mar Conference. And here, Mar actually stood for nothing but marshes. Now, this conference was held in early 60s in order to ensure conservation of marshes. Because in India, you don't have so many marshy land, but because India is a tropical country with high rate of evaporation. But when you talk about regions such as Britain, Western Europe, some parts of North America, there the amount of these marshy lands at one point of time were very significant. In fact, the entirety of Great Britain or entirety of United Kingdom is built upon the marshy landscape. That is why there the soil is so very rich in organic compound. Now, what the Western nations they have done is they have gone ahead with encroachment and construction across majority of these marshy areas. And now they are basically lecturing the other countries. That is a different matter altogether. But then when they were doing this, it was in 60s, early 60s that this Mar conference was held, and a global kind of consensus was being built up about the importance of conservation of these marshes, that how these marshes need to be protected, how these marshes need to be conserved if you have to conserve the ecosystem. All of that eventually led to a meeting in 1971 in the Iranian town of Ramsar, and that is where the Ramsar Convention was arrived at. So wetlands basically protects also the coastline by decreasing the effects of tropical cyclones and other calamities by offering a kind of a buffer zone, works as a natural filter, and here you have a kind of an ecotone where the terrestrial and aquatic systems also coexist. So this Ramsar Convention is actually a convention on wetlands that was signed in 1971 in the Iranian city of Ramsar. The negotiation had started in the 60s itself, And various different countries, the civil society organizations, NGOs, all of them participated in that conference for the conservation and protection of wetlands. Finally, it came into force in 1975. It is not a regulatory regime. This is something which you have to keep in mind for your prelims. It is not a regulatory regime, means it will not pass on laws about how to handle the wetlands. The states need to pass their, or the countries, the member nations need to pass their own legislation to handle these wetlands. That is why India has passed the wetland rules of 2010, which was further amended in 2017 as well. Now, overall, this Ramsar Convention was also modified by various conventions such as the Paris Protocol in 1982, Regina Amendments in 1987. Now, in this Ramsar Convention, basically, you have the designation of Ramsar sites. So every year, what the various different countries do is, in order to provide a greater level of recognition, greater level of protection and prominence to the water bodies, they submit a list of water bodies to the Ramsar Convention. Now, then the convention decides whether that particular water body fits the bill for perfect conservation, and then it is declared as a Ramsar site. Ramsar site, any particular region being declared as a Ramsar site means there will be significant amount of tourism as well. There will be significant amount of conservation and raising of awareness as well. That will mean a greater level and a greater degree of protection. But there are certain wetlands which are on a verge of immediate threat, which need to be protected from immediate threat. And those wetlands, they are entered or they are put under Montreal's record. So, as per Montreal's record, it is a mechanism which was launched in 1990 and is associated with the Ramsar Advisory Mission. It is a register of the list of those Ramsar sites that need urgent attention. That is about the Montreal's record. So this is a timeline for your reference purposes for the Ramsar Convention, where you will observe and notice that in 1962 you had the Mar Conference, which called for an international treaty on wetlands, and for the next decade the text for the Ramsar Convention was finalized. It was in 1971 when the Ramsar Conference took place, and you had various different countries, NGOs, member organizations which participated. Australia was the first country to adhere or to accede to this convention. It was the first country for that matter. And then in 1974, again relevant for your prelims. First Ramsar site which was declared in Australia. And the convention came into force, UNESCO as being its depository, and India became the contracting party to the convention in 1981. Okay, Kyoladev National Park and Chilika Lake, they were declared as Ramsar sites. Where is it that the Kyoladev National Park is situated? In which particular state is the Kyoladev National Park situated? It is situated in the state of Rajasthan. Okay, and Chilika Lake obviously in Odisha. Now, the World Wetland Day is generally celebrated on 2nd of February, and that is the day when you have significantly newer areas which are designated as the Ramsar sites. Now, here, basically, the conference of parties, which is a meeting in any particular convention, whenever you have a meeting of the various member organizations, member states, and member countries, that is referred to as the conference of parties. And this conference of parties is the highest decision making body in any convention. Now, here in prelims, the questions are often twisted in a way to mislead you in a manner whereby they will say in the statement that COP or Conference of Parties for Ramsar Convention is held annually. The last time it was held in India, like that. So there, the key point that you have to focus is that whether it is held annually or not. But generally, we take that as granted and we only focus upon where it was held, because that is what we have studied in current affairs. So be on the lookout, because when we talk about COP or Conference of Parties for Ramsar, it is not held annually. It is held every 2 to 3 years. The last Conference of Parties, that is the 14th COP to the Ramsar, was co-hosted by Wuhan, China, and Geneva, Switzerland in November 2022. That was the convention. Now, how many Ramsar sites are there in India? Do we have any idea? How many Ramsar sites are there in India? Very good, Sajan. Benita, correct. You have 75. Now, why 75? To mark 75 years of independence. Nonetheless, the Ramsar Convention has got 6 international organization partners, including BirdLife International. Why BirdLife International? Because the wetlands, they are basically home to a large amount of migratory species of birds. So that is also something you can add on when you are talking about the benefits, right? Home to large number of migratory species. Large number of migratory species of birds. So that is why conservation of wetlands is considered to be very important in conservation of the bird and the migratory species in general. Okay. So BirdLife International is a natural partner. Then IUCN. IUCN basically stands for International Union for Conservation of Nature. It is that IUCN which regularly comes out with the Red Book, which gives you an idea about the critically endangered, endangered, and vulnerable species. Then you have Wetlands International, World Wildlife Forum for Nature, World Wildlife Fund for Nature. Then you have International Water Management Institute and Wildfowl and Wetland Trust. These are your basic international organization partners of Ramsar Convention. And these are the, excuse me, these are your Ramsar wetland sites in India as per the latest count. Ideally, I would not want, or I would not suggest you to learn this. Okay, that is not something that I would suggest. What I would suggest to you is, because there are 75, maybe next year there will be more than that, what I would suggest is a kind of a scientific reading of this. So what you need to do is go for state wise, state wise list. Narendra, inorganic is the difference between BOD and COD? Yes. Inderpreet, have you not understood eutrophication? Is there a doubt which still prevails, or is that clear? Please let me know. Inderpreet. Okay. And Kishan, all saturated soil can contain water. No, not all saturated soil can contain water. Many of them times it will lead to flow. So what happens is, in the case of the wetland, you have some capacity to store water, to absorb water. So if you observe, majority of these wetlands which have been listed, they include certain lakes, ponds, artificial, man-made, all of them, right? So whenever you have excess rainfall, they will end up absorbing all of them. So ideally, I would want you to approach here in the case of a state-wise list, and also then take note of new additions, newer additions as a part of current affairs. And then once you have noticed that, then what is it that you have to note into that? Let's say in a particular year, 5 new have been added. Whichever year you are giving the examination, that year, let's suppose 5 new have been added. So what to look into that? the states, right, where they have been added, which is the location and location. Then after that, any peculiar event or species found in the region. So these are the areas that you have to look at. And where is it that you will refer to? Always, I would suggest that refer to this particular source. This is a government maintained source. Okay. And you will come across this website, wiinvis.in. So that .nic.in, refer to this, and you will basically find up any latest additions. So in this website you will also find a list of the various national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, the biodiversity heritage hotspots, that or the biodiversity heritage sites that you have. All those various lists, you will find it here. But then I don't expect you to rectify all of them. I expect you to just cover them from the basic perspective. Okay. So then we come across to the portion of mangroves. Mangroves is something that we will initiate the discussion for in the next weekend. And that is where we'll restrict our discussion for today. So, overall, in today's discussion, we have had a complete establishment of the introduction portion where we have seen about the biomes, we have seen about the ecosystem, we have taken a look at the ecotone, niche, all those areas, ecological pyramid, food chain, food web, the bioaccumulation, bio magnification. What do we understand by ecological succession, types of ecological succession, wetlands, then we have taken a look at the low-tick lentic ecosystem, eutrophication, harmful algal bloom. So all these regions we have taken a deeper look into. Any doubts that you have till now, please let me know. Any doubts that you have? No? So I hope that is a good sign. I hope that is not because it is something that you have no clue about what was going on. I hope I take that as a positive sign. BOD is the biological oxygen demand of any particular water body, where it represents the amount of oxygen that is required to decompose all the organic matter in the water body. That is BOD, right? Because for decomposition also oxygen will be required. So for decomposing the organic matter, what is the total amount of oxygen that will be required? That is BOD. Okay. Okay. So can I read books first two chapters and your PPT? Only the PPT, the additional reading materials will also suffice. Okay. If BOD is high, then COD will be even higher. If BOD is high, means the amount of pollution in that water body is also very high, because that much amount of oxygen will be required for the process of decomposition. Then Sangam, food chain. Food chain is basically that relationship that you have in an ecosystem, which tells you that how energy is transferred from the producer to the consumers. So the producers will be uh, well consumed by the herbivores. The herbivores will be consumed by the carnivores. So that is depiction of food chain. Kishan, can we say savanna is frequently goes through ecological succession? In certain areas, yes. In certain areas, the secondary succession is something which is very predominant. Good. I like that kind of derivation. Does BOD exclude dissolved oxygen required? No. BOD includes the total oxygen, because if decomposition is carried out underwater, think about it. Will that decomposition requirement sideline that, okay, this is the oxygen required for respiration? I will not count this out. I will only count the other oxygen. No. All the entirety of oxygen. And Abhishek, I made notes of geography, 2 PPT in 4 pages. Is it good? It is very nice, as long as it helps you revise. So, with that, I hope that I have addressed the doubts and I have addressed your requirements and your expectation when it comes to the portion of environment ecology. And We will continue this discussion further ahead in the next weekend, where we shall be talking about the various different types of pollution. We shall be talking about the different legislations which have been brought in, the amendments which have been brought in, the aspect of waste management, and then eventually biodiversity, mass extinctions, international conventions, all of that we shall be talking about. So that is where we'll restrict the session here today. Till we meet again next weekend, do take care of yourself, relax a bit, don't get over tensed. The examination will be conquered eventually. Take care of yourself. Goodbye. Thank you, and have a good night. Mangrove cell, Abhishek, is basically the new cell, which are new organization which has been formed by the West Bengal government for promotion of mangroves. We will talk about this in the next weekend. Okay.